My name is Zoey. I'm 28 years old, and this Christmas morning, I woke up to find my $100,000 Tesla stolen by my own mother. So I decided to give her the ultimate gift, an eviction notice. The smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans usually made me feel safe. It was the scent of a made-it life. At 28, I'd finally stopped living like a college student on a budget. I owned this house, a sleek, modern 4-bedroom in the suburbs of Seattle, and I owned my time. Or so I thought. I pushed my shoulder-length blonde hair out of my face and tightened the belt of my silk robe. It was 7 a.m. on Christmas morning. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a light dusting of snow settled on the lawn like powdered sugar. It was perfect. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered, grabbing a small wrapped box from the kitchen island. It was a personalized keychain I'd ordered for my newest pride and joy. 6 months ago, I had finally treated myself. After 5 years of 80-hour weeks as a software engineer, I'd bought a Model S Plaid. Midnight silver, cream interior, and faster than a heartbeat. I'd parked it in the garage the night before. The charging cable clicked into place like a promise of a new, easier year. I pushed the heavy door leading to the garage, the cool air hitting my skin. I didn't even turn on the lights at first. I didn't need to. I just wanted to see the silhouette of the car, to feel that little spark of, I did this. But the garage was dark, and it felt wrong. The air was too still. I flicked the switch. The fluorescent lights hummed to life, flickering once, twice, and then bathing the space in a sterile white glow. The driveway side garage door was closed, the charging cable was coiled neatly on its wall mount, but the center of the floor, the spot where 60 tons of precision engineering and $100,000 of my hard-earned money should have been, was empty. My heart did a slow, sickening roll in my chest. "Maybe it was stolen," I whispered, my breath hitching. "Someone hacked the code. Someone broke in." I walked to the center of the concrete floor, my slippers silent. There was no broken glass, no signs of forced entry, just a clean, empty rectangle of gray floor. My hands started to shake. I turned back toward the house, my mind racing through insurance claims and police reports. I needed my phone. I needed my mother. Mom was staying in the guest suite. She'd been there for 2 years, ever since her investments dried up. I'd been happy to help. I thought we were a team. As I reached the door, I heard the faint sound of humming from the kitchen. It was the upbeat tune of Jingle Bell Rock. I burst back into the warmth of the house. My mother, Diane, was standing by the stove, wearing a festive red apron. She looked at me, her eyes bright, and a terrifyingly wide smile plastered on her face. "Good morning, honey," she chirped, flipping a pancake. "Did you see? Isn't the house so much quieter without that big, bulky thing in the way?" The box with the keychain slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood with a dull thud. "Mom," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater, "where is my car?" Diane didn't look up. She just drizzled syrup onto a plate. "Now, Zoey, don't get worked up. It's Christmas. Let's just have a nice breakfast first. Where is my car?" She finally looked at me, her expression shifting from cheerful to that practiced maternal pity that always made me feel 5 years old. "Oh, Zoey," she sighed, setting the spatula down. "We had to make a family executive decision. Sit down. I have something wonderful to tell you." The kitchen felt like it was shrinking. The smell of the pancakes, which usually signaled a cozy morning, now made my stomach turn. I didn't sit. I stayed rooted to the spot, my fingers digging into the marble of the kitchen island until my knuckles turned white. An executive decision? I repeated. My voice was a low, dangerous vibration. Mom, that car is in my name. It's my property. How is there an executive decision that involves my car being gone? Diane wiped her hands on her apron and walked over, trying to place a hand on my shoulder. I flinched away. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of weary disappointment, as if I was the one being difficult. Zoey, honey, look at this house. Look at your clothes. You are so successful. You have everything you could ever want, she said, her voice dropping into that soothing, manipulative tone she used when she wanted something. But your sister, Mia, is struggling. She's been crying for weeks because the deposit for the crystal ballroom was due, and they were going to lose their date. The wedding of her dreams was slipping away. I stared at her, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The wedding? You're talking about Mia's wedding? It's not just a wedding, Zoey. It's her moment, Diane said, her eyes suddenly shining with an artificial fervor. Brad's family is very prominent, and Mia needs this to start her life on the right foot. So I reached out to an old friend of your father's, the one who owns the luxury dealership downtown. He's been looking for a Model S in that exact trim. He gave us $60,000 cash right there on the spot. $60,000? I choked out. That car is worth over $100. You stole my car and sold it for $60,000? I didn't steal it, Diane snapped, her maternal mask finally slipping to reveal the entitlement underneath. I am your mother. I raised you. I used the spare key you keep in the junk drawer and the power of attorney you signed when I was handling your taxes last year. I did what was best for this family. That power of attorney was for medical emergencies, Mom, not for liquidating my assets. Just then, the front door chimes played a festive melody. In walked Mia and her fiancé, Brad. Mia was draped in a brand new cream-colored wool coat with a faux fur collar, a coat that probably cost more than my mortgage payment for the month. She was beaming, her phone already out, likely filming some Christmas morning vlog. "Merry Christmas!" Mia squealed, heading straight for the coffee pot. She didn't even look at me until she noticed the deathly silence in the room. "Oh, Zoey, don't look like that. Mom told you she was going to talk to you. Isn't it amazing? The venue's booked, the catering is upgraded to the platinum tier, and I even got the Vera Wang dress I wanted." Brad stood behind her, nodding like a bobblehead. "Yeah, thanks, Zoey. Big move. Really appreciate you stepping up for the family. It's good to see you finally sharing the wealth." I looked at the three of them. My mother, who I had supported for years, my sister, who hadn't worked a full day in her life, and her entitled fiancé. They stood there in my kitchen, in the house I paid for, acting as if they had just done me a favor by robbing me. "Sharing the wealth?" I whispered. "You stole my car on Christmas." "It's just a car, Zoey," Mia said, rolling her eyes as she stirred sugar into her coffee. "You can just buy another one, but I only get one wedding. Don't be so selfish. It's Christmas." Diane nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Now sit down, the pancakes are getting cold, and we have so much more to plan. Since the car money covered the venue, we were thinking we could use your backyard for the rehearsal dinner." I didn't sit down. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. I looked at my mother, then at the golden child sister who was currently sipping coffee from my favorite mug. "You're right. It is Christmas, and I think it's time I gave you all exactly what you deserve." The calm in my voice seemed to unsettle them for a split second, but Diane's entitlement was a thick armor. She mistook my lack of screaming for submission. "That's the spirit, honey," Mom said, reaching for the stack of plates. "I knew you'd understand eventually. Family is the only thing that matters. And since we're all on the same page, there's one more thing we should discuss to keep the momentum going for the wedding." I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms over my silk robe. "Oh, there's more?" Mia beamed, clutching Brad's arm. "Well, since you have that extra guest room and the finished basement, and since Mom is already here, Brad and I realized it doesn't make sense for us to keep paying rent on our apartment. We can save so much more for our honeymoon if we just move in here after the wedding." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Move in? Here?" "Just until we get on our feet," Mia added quickly, though her eyes were already scanning the living room, likely deciding where her influencer vanity would go. "And Mom says she can move into the smaller room so Brad and I can have the guest suite. It has the better light for my TikToks." Brad chimed in, his voice thick with unearned confidence. "Plus, it'll be great for you, Zoey. You're always working. You need people around to liven this place up. It's a bit sterile, don't you think?" I looked at my mother. She was nodding, a look of pure triumph on her face. She had orchestrated this. She wasn't just staying in my home, she was colonizing it. She had sold my car to fund the party, and now she was giving away my square footage to ensure her favorite child never had to grow up. "You already promised them my house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's our home, Zoey," Mom said firmly, her tone shifting to that of a primary school teacher correcting a slow student. "I've lived here for 2 years. I've made this a home, and Mia is my daughter. If you have space, she has space. That's how a family works." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. Instead, I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb swiped the screen, the light reflecting in my eyes. "What are you doing?" Mia asked, her smile faltering. "I'm calling the police," I said. I hit the 3 digits and put the phone to my ear. The ringing sound seemed to echo off the high ceilings. "Hello?" "Yes, I'd like to report a grand theft auto and a fraudulent use of power of attorney. Yes, 1422 Oak Crest Drive. No, the suspects are still on the property." "Are you insane?" Mia shrieked, her voice reaching a glass-shattering pitch. "You're going to send your own mother to jail on Christmas over a car? I have a wedding in 3 months. Do you know what this will do to my reputation?" "Think about how this looks, Zoey," Diane pleaded, her voice cracking into a theatrical sob. "The neighbors, the family. You'll be the woman who had her mother arrested on Christmas Day. You'll be a pariah. Please, for the love of God, hang up." The operator was asking for details. I looked at Diane, who was now clutching her chest, and Mia, who was red-faced and trembling. Brad just stood there, looking terrified that his free ride was crashing before it even started. "You know what?" I said into the phone, my gaze never leaving my mother's. "Actually, I'll come down to the station to file the formal report in person. I have documents to gather. Yes, thank you." I clicked the phone shut. The room was silent, save for the heavy, ragged breathing of my mother. "Thank you," Diane exhaled, leaning against the counter. "Thank you for coming to your senses, Zoey. We gave us a real scare there, Zoey. Now let's just put this unpleasantness behind us and—" "I didn't say I was stopping," I interrupted. I turned away from them and headed toward my office. "Enjoy your breakfast. It's the last one you'll be having in this house." I walked into my office and locked the door behind me. I could hear them through the wood. Mia's frantic whispers, Diane's indignant huffs, the clinking of silverware as they tried to pretend the world was ending. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the reliable one who would always bend. But they forgot one thing. I was a coder. I knew how to find the bugs in a system, and I knew exactly how to delete them. The office was my sanctuary. It was a room of glass, steel, and high-end hardware, a sharp contrast to the soft, festive home my mother had tried to curate in the rest of the house. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the leather cool against my back, and stared at the triple monitor setup. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The blue glow of the screens was enough. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a rhythmic clicking that sounded like a countdown. First, I opened my home security portal. I had Nest cameras tucked into the corners of the garage and the driveway, discreet little eyes that recorded everything. I scrubbed back the footage to 2 a.m. There she was, my mother, wrapped in her bathrobe, guiding a man I didn't recognize into my garage. She handed him the spare key I'd hidden in the kitchen. I watched as he backed my midnight silver Tesla out of the driveway, the silent motor barely registering on the audio. Mom stood there, waving goodbye to my hard work like she was seeing off a guest. Then she walked back inside, checked the mail, and hummed a tune. "Caught in 4K, Mom," I whispered. I downloaded the clip to a cloud drive and sent a copy to my lawyer. Next, I opened a folder labeled Property Management. When my mother moved in 2 years ago, I had been cautious. My lawyer had insisted she sign a living agreement. It wasn't a standard lease, but a document that granted her occupancy contingent on lawful behavior and mutual respect of property. Paragraph 4, Section B. Immediate termination of occupancy in the event of criminal activity or property damage. Stealing a $100,000 vehicle and forging a power of attorney definitely qualified as criminal activity. I pulled up the template for a notice of termination of occupancy. In the state of Washington, self-help evictions are tricky, but when the occupant commits a felony against the homeowner, the peaceful enjoyment of the property is legally severed. I filled in the blanks. I didn't just want her out, I wanted her out now. The printer in the corner began to whir. The sound of the paper feeding through the rollers was the only thing I could hear over the muffled sound of a Christmas movie playing in the living room. It's a Wonderful Life was blaring. The irony was almost funny. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a stack of manila folders. I organized the documents, the security footage stills, the original car title, the forged POA my mother had used, which she'd left in the junk drawer like an amateur, and the eviction notice. A soft knock came at the door. "Zoey?" It was Mia. Her voice was sweet, dripping with that fake little sister charm she used when she wanted to borrow a dress. "Mom made a fresh pot of coffee. We're opening the big presents now. Why don't you come out? We can all just reset. It's Christmas." I looked at the printer as it spat out the final page of the eviction notice. "I'll be out in a minute, Mia," I said, my voice flat. "I'm just finishing up a few things. I have a very special gift for everyone." "Oh, okay." I could hear the excitement in her voice. She probably thought I'd bought her the designer shoes she'd been hinting at. I stood up, smoothed out my robe, and picked up the folders. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't out of fear. It was the adrenaline of a system finally purging a virus. I wasn't the bank anymore. I wasn't the reliable one. I was the owner of the house, and the house was full. I stepped out of the office, the manila folders tucked under my arm like a weapon. The living room was a sea of red and green. The fireplace was crackling, gas-powered, but the warmth felt real enough. My mother had gone all out with the decorations this year, using my credit card to buy hand-blown glass ornaments and a 10-foot noble fir that smelled like a forest. Mia and Brad were cuddled on the sectional sofa, a plate of half-eaten gingerbread cookies between them. My mother was back in her throne, a wing-back chair by the window, sipping from a mug of spiked cocoa. They looked like a picture-perfect American family from a catalog. "There she is," Brad said, raising his mug. "The woman of the hour. Come on, Zoey, the fire's warm and Mia's dying to show you the mood board for the rehearsal dinner." I walked to the center of the room, standing under the chandelier. I didn't sit down. I felt like an outsider in my own home, watching a play where the actors had forgotten who owned the stage. "You look so serious, honey," Mom said, her eyes tracking the folders. "Is that work? Put it away. It's a holiday. We've already moved past that little misunderstanding from earlier. I've decided to forgive your outburst. We're all a little stressed with the wedding planning." I almost laughed. She had decided to forgive me for being upset that she stole my car. The audacity was a physical weight in the room. "I'm not here to talk about work, Mom, and I'm not here to look at mood boards, Mia." Mia pouted, her lower lip trembling in that practiced way she'd used since she was 5 to get the bigger piece of cake. "But Zoey, I found the perfect lavender for the bridesmaids' dresses. It'll look so good against your hair." "I don't think I'll be in the wedding party, Mia," I said. The room went still. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the soft ho 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 of a Santa in the movie on TV. "What are you talking about?" Diane asked, her voice sharpening. "Of course you are. You're the maid of honor. You're paying for the open bar and the floral arrangements, remember?" "No," I said, stepping toward the coffee table. I set the folders down with a deliberate thud on top of a bridal magazine. "I'm not, because I'm not the bank anymore. I'm just a woman who had her car stolen by her own mother." "Zoey, stop it," Mia snapped, standing up. "You're ruining everything. This is supposed to be the best day of my life. Can't you just be happy for me for once? Why does everything have to be about your money and your car?" "It's not about the car, Mia," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "And I'm not here to look at mood boards, Wom." Diane shocked, her eyes widening at the unexpected venom. "I didn't mean anything by it," she began, her tone softening into the familiar woe is me melodrama. "We're family," Diane shouted, standing up to face me. "I carried you for 9 months. I sacrificed my youth for you. And now that you have a little success, you want to hoard it? You want to watch your sister walk down a budget aisle while you drive a $100,000 toy?" "I earned that toy," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "I worked through birthdays and holidays while Mia was finding herself on your dime. And I didn't just give you a place to stay, Mom. I gave you a life. And this is how you repay me? By forging my signature and selling my property?" "I did what I had to do," Diane screamed, "and you can't prove a thing. It's my word against yours." I reached down and flipped open the first folder. I pulled out the high-resolution stills from the security footage. I laid them out on the coffee table like a winning poker hand. "That's you, Mom, at 2:14 a.m., handing my keys to a stranger. And this," I pulled out the next document, "this is the forged power of attorney. My lawyer already confirmed the signature is a clumsy imitation. And this is the most important one." I picked up the final document, the one with the bold red header, and held it out to her. "What is that?" Brad asked, leaning forward, his face pale. "It's your Christmas present," I said. "Read it." Diane took the paper with a trembling hand, her rings clicking against the heavy cardstock. Her eyes scanned the bold, capitalized letters at the top of the page. I watched the color drain from her face, leaving her skin a sallow, sickly gray. "Legal notice of termination of occupancy," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated venom. You're evicting me? Your own mother? On Christmas Day?" "No," I corrected, my voice steady. "I'm terminating your occupancy. You don't have a lease, Mom. You had a living agreement based on the premise that you weren't a criminal. You broke that agreement when you sold my car." Mia snatched the paper from Diane's hand. Her eyes darted across the lines of legalese. "This says we have 24 hours. Zoey, you can't do this. We have nowhere to go. All the money from the car is already tied up in the venue deposits." "That sounds like a you problem, Mia," I said. I felt a strange, cold lightness in my chest. For years, I had carried the weight of their expectations, their debts, and their drama. Seeing that paper in her hand felt like finally setting the luggage down. "You can't kick us out in the snow!" Brad stood up, trying to puff out his chest to look intimidating. "There are laws, Zoey. Squatters' rights. You have to give us 30 days. "Brad, you're an idiot," I said flatly. "You're not a tenant. You're a guest who overstayed a 3-hour dinner. And Mom is an occupant who committed a felony on the premises. My lawyer is already on standby, and the local precinct has the security footage. If I call them back and tell you you're refusing to leave, they won't just escort you out. They'll take Mom out in handcuffs." Diane let out a low, guttural wail and collapsed back into her wingback chair. It was the dying swan routine she usually used to end any argument she was losing. "I gave you everything. I sacrificed my life so you could go to that fancy college, and this is how you treat me? You're a monster, Zoey, a cold-blooded monster. I'm the person who paid for your heart medication for 2 years. I'm the person who paid off your credit card debt so you wouldn't go to collections. I was your daughter, but today I'm just the homeowner, and the homeowner wants you gone." Mia started to cry, real tears this time, the kind that ruined her expensive mascara. "But my wedding! If you do this, the story will get out. Everyone will know. Brad's parents will think we're trash." "Then I guess you should have thought about that before you let Mom steal my Tesla to pay for your platinum flowers." I walked over to the smart home hub mounted on the wall. With a few taps, I began the process of deauthorizing their devices. The festive music cut out abruptly, leaving the room in a deafening, ringing silence. The smart lights dimmed to a cold, clinical white. "The guest suite door will lock at exactly 8 a.m. tomorrow. I've already called a junk removal service for anything left behind. I suggest you spend your Christmas evening packing instead of crying." "You wouldn't," Diane hissed, her face contorting into something unrecognizable. "You don't have the guts. You've always been the good girl. You'll fold by dinner time." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound sense of exhaustion. "The good girl left with the Tesla, Mom, and she's not coming back." I turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own greed. I sat on the edge of my bed, the door locked and the lights dimmed. Upstairs, the house felt like a hollow shell. Downstairs, the silence had been replaced by the frantic, ugly sounds of a house being dismantled. I heard the heavy thud of suitcases being dragged across the hard wood. I heard the frantic tearing of packing tape, a jagged, screeching sound that cut through the night. But mostly, I heard the arguing. "I told you she'd snap!" Mia's voice drifted up the vents, sharp and hysterical. "I told you we should have waited until after the honeymoon to tell her. Now the venue is going to call Brad's parents when the check bounces, and I'll be the laughingstock of the country." "Oh, shut up, Mia!" My mother snapped back, her voice raw. "I did this for you. I'm the one being thrown out into the snow like a dog, and all you can think about is your centerpieces?" It was the first time I'd ever heard Diane use that tone with her golden child. The mask of the perfect, united family hadn't just slipped, it had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Without my money to grease the wheels, they were finally seeing each other for who they really were: desperate, selfish people. A heavy knock rattled my bedroom door. I didn't move. "Zoey, open this door." It was Brad. He sounded like he'd been drinking. "We can't fit everything into my sedan. You have to let us use the garage for storage, just for a week. You can't be this heartless." "The locks change at 8 a.m., Brad," I called out, my voice flat and emotionless. "Anything left in that garage will be considered abandoned property. I'd start prioritizing the expensive stuff if I were you." I heard him kick the door, a dull, frustrated strike, before stomping away. I leaned my head against the cool wood of the doorframe. A part of me, the old Zoey, the fixer, wanted to open the door. She wanted to tell them it was all a bad joke, to offer them a glass of wine and a check to make the screaming stop. But that Zoey had been sold for $60,000 and a platinum wedding package. I pulled up my laptop and checked the GPS tracker on the Tesla. It was an old habit, but now it was a necessity. The car was stationary. It was at a private lot 10 miles away. I'd already sent the coordinates to the police and my insurance company. The friend of the family who bought it was about to have a very long Christmas night dealing with a grand theft auto investigation. Around midnight, the house finally went quiet. I walked to my window and looked down at the driveway. Brad's mid-size sedan was packed so tightly the rear bumper was nearly scraping the pavement. Boxes were strapped to the roof with bungee cords, looking like a precarious tower of greed. My mother was standing by the car, wrapped in her expensive wool coat, staring up at my window. Even in the dim glow of the streetlights, I could see the fury in her eyes. She wasn't sorry, she wasn't sad, she was just waiting for her next move. I closed the curtains. I didn't sleep. I spent the night watching the clock on my nightstand tick toward 8 a.m. Every minute felt like a liter of poison leaving my system. I watched the sun begin to bleed over the horizon, turning the snowy lawn from a ghostly blue to a cold, pale gold. 7:55 a.m. I stood up, dressed in a sharp blazer and jeans, no more silk robes. I walked downstairs, my boots clicking firmly on the stairs. The living room was a disaster. Crumpled wrapping paper, half-packed boxes of sentimental items they couldn't fit, and the smell of stale coffee. The 10-foot tree was still there, its lights flickering weakly, looking pathetic in the morning light. My mother was sitting on a single suitcase near the front door. She looked older. The defiance was still there, but it was brittle now. "You're really doing this," she said. Her voice was a raspy whisper. "You're really watching your mother walk out that door with nowhere to go?" "You have $60,000 in wedding deposits, Mom. I suggest you start making some calls. Maybe the Crystal Ballroom has a nice lobby you can sit in." The clock on the wall chimed 8 times. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The airy air was biting, a sharp shock of cold that made my lungs ache. "Time's up," I said. Diane stood up, her joints creaking. She didn't look like the formidable matriarch who had dictated my life for the last decade. She looked small, but even as she reached for her bag, she couldn't help but fire one last shot. "You'll be alone, Zoey," she spat, her voice trembling with a mixture of cold and rage. "You'll have your house and your car and your precious career, but when you're sick or when you're old, there won't be a soul in this world who cares if you breathe. You've traded your family for a machine." "I didn't trade them, Mom," I said, my voice steady as I held the door open. "I just stopped paying for the privilege of being treated like a stranger." She marched past me, the scent of her expensive perfume, the one I'd bought her for her birthday, lingering in the freezing air for a fleeting second before the wind whipped it away. In the driveway, the scene was pathetic. Mia was already huddled in the passenger seat of Brad's overflowing sedan, her face buried in her hands. Brad was struggling to tie down a final box of Mia's shoes on the roof. When he saw me, he didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. He just climbed into the driver's seat and stared straight ahead. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, the rideshare I'd seen Diane order on the security app. The driver jumped out to help her with her heavy suitcases. She didn't say goodbye, she didn't look back. She just climbed into the back seat, and within seconds, both cars were pulling away, their tires crunching over the fresh snow. I watched until their taillights vanished around the corner. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the sound of a system that had finally been debugged. I stepped back inside and shut the heavy oak door. The click of the lock felt like a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. I walked to the smart home panel and entered a new master code. I heard the electronic deadbolts throughout the house slide into place, thwack, thwack, thwack. I was officially the only person with the keys to my life. I walked into the kitchen. The mess was still there. The half-eaten pancakes, the sticky syrup, the family mugs. I didn't feel like cleaning it. Not yet. Instead, I went to the living room and sat on the floor in front of the massive Christmas tree. I reached out and pulled a single ornament off a branch, a small glass Tesla I'd bought myself as a joke when I first placed the order for the car. I turned it over in my hand, watching the firelight dance in the glass. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the local police department. I swiped the screen, my heart skipping a beat. Vehicle located at 992 Industrial Way. Suspect in custody for possession of stolen property. Please contact Officer Miller for recovery details. I let out a long, shaky breath. I leaned my head back against the sofa and closed my eyes. The car was safe. The house was mine. The quiet was absolute. For the first time in years, I wasn't wondering what my mother needed, or what Mia was complaining about, or how much money I was going to lose today. I was just Zoey. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of the expensive champagne I'd originally bought for the family toast. I raised the glass to the empty room. "Merry Christmas, Zoey," I whispered. I took a sip. It was cold, crisp, and exactly what I'd paid for.